going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the Victory Life Legacy Spotlight. I'm your host, Dwight Vick, owner and founder of Victory Life. And today I have a special guest in the Victory Life Legacy Spotlight building. This woman has influenced me and so many countless others at our time at Virginia Tech, before and beyond, none other than Derita Dawkins. She is the Assistant Vice Chancellor and Deputy Athletic Director for the University of Arkansas. So, Derita, how you doing?
Doing great. I'm doing great.
Well, I'm glad you're doing great. You made my life great, and this would not be anything else but special for me because I've had so many great guests on. Sharon Stiff, Antonio Banks, even on the Vic 757 show I host with my cousin Mike. You have been shouted out several times when we do our Hokie shout outs, and on this platform, the Victory Life Legacy Spotlight, I've had people come on from, as I mentioned, Sharon and so many other guests who remember you and appreciate you. And this is going back 25 years. So that is a lasting impression. But before we talk about our time in Blacksburg together and the influence you had on me, the positive impact on me and my teammates and my brothers, female and male athletes, let's talk about where it all started. I think it's important when I have guests on to talk about the foundation, because before you became Derita Ratcliffe, now Derita Dawkins, you were a young woman and you were being taught and led. So where are you from, for those that don't know you, and where did it start off? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Prentice Park in Portsmouth, Virginia, about 3 blocks from the shipyard. And everything about Portsmouth had an impact on me. Unfortunately, not all of it was positive stuff, but it had a positive impact in the long run, because it fueled me to want to have a different life. Like I said, I grew up in Prentice Park. I have 3 brothers. 2 of them grew up in the house with me. And so in terms of my nuclear family, I'm in the middle, the only girl. A brother who's 15 months older and one who's 5 years younger. My 2 older brothers, in fact, including my quote half brother, my father wouldn't let us call him that, but they're neither graduated from high school. Both are heroin addicts. So there was lots going on around me growing up. I remember back in the day, you go to the store and buy cigarettes and beer for your parents. And I remember being sent to the store, and it was getting dark, and I'm maybe 9-10 years old, and I knew to just walk different, so I mean, as a tomboy anyway, but just to walk so people wouldn't pay attention to me and maybe think it was my brother, so lessons like that growing up, being aware of what was around me at all times, which I think has served me in my career, because I tend to put myself in a corner where I can view everything. But I mean, there were just so many things growing up in Portsmouth, in Tidewater in general, in the 70s, that was going on. I mean, heroin was ravaging the community, but those were the people who were my brother's friends, who, made sure I was okay. Even years forward, when I was at Tech and I'd bring people home, like I would intentionally drive down Elm Avenue and say hi to the dudes out on the corner. All right, little rat, you home? I'm like, yep. How long you gonna be here? 3 days? Okay, we got you. Yep. Don't let nobody break in my car. So there were, again, lots of lessons growing up, but one of the probably most enduring was, this isn't how I want to live. I mean, God bless him, but I don't want to find a guy who's in the Navy and get married and, that be the pinnacle of what I just always knew that was something different for me. So I never had any inclination that I would not go to college. I decided in the 7th grade that I was going to go to James Madison.
Hold on. In the 7th grade?
7th grade. We went on
where'd that come from?
We went on a National Junior Honor Society trip, and we went to like Montpelier and a couple, just kind of floating up that Charlottesville, Harrisonburg direction or whatever. And I remember thinking, this is what college looks like on TV. You know, it was, you know, pastoral, and there's a lake and the Greek houses on the other side of the lake and ducks. And I was like, oh my God, like this. And it was just peaceful, right? It was not sirens and fights. And I mean, it was peaceful.
Yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go to school here. And then I flipped for about a year and a half, maybe two. And I was all about NC State. So I was going to go to NC State.
Really?
My mother's from North Carolina. I grew up watching all ACC, you know, everything, but mostly basketball, because my mother played college basketball at 5'1.5". Yeah. So she played basketball at Livingstone College. And so I was like, okay, I can live with my grandmother. I had this whole elaborate plan about how it was going to be okay and it was going to work well. And my father was like, you really thought about this? And I was like, yeah. And, you know, I could do this. And if I go to high school there, you know, by the time I finish, you know, I can have in-state status and, you know, he was like, oh, no. Get in the car, let's go home. Because we went to Carolina every summer to visit my grandmother. And I, you know, had thought this thing out. And he was like, you know, I was like, okay, well, that's not going to happen. And even then I was like super practical, right? Like I knew I needed to have in-state status to be able to go to school in North Carolina.
Yeah.
So, so I look back, and it's, I guess at this age, it's hard to keep stuff segmented, but I look back at the schools that I attended and the mottos of those schools. So as you know, I went to IC Norcom High School.
Norcom, the Greyhounds.
Yeah, which is also where my father and my grandmother graduated from.
Wow.
And it's subsequently my younger brother. But so went to Norcom, and Norcom's motto is to be rather than to seem.
I never knew that. Are you serious?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just knew about the band and the football players. I didn't know about that. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So go ahead.
No. Go. I was going to say, you mentioned your dad and your grandmother and your mom. Just because, you know, obviously you're a mentor to me, but we're friends. I looked up to you. I still look up to you. I follow you. You're very family oriented. You always give credit. I see your pictures about your dad and your parents, your family. Just talk about, and I'm not trying to go all the way back, but at the same time, I think it's important for you to speak on the influence and the relationship you have with them.
Okay.
And what they did for you.
So as you know, both of my parents are deceased now, but
Yep.
My father is very interesting relationship. Again, I'm the only girl, so he has 3 sons and me. And I'm probably the most like my father, like stubborn. Yeah. So we had some interesting conversations after I got older, but I grew up in a pretty stereotypical Southern Black family. So there were lots of things I was told I couldn't do because I was a girl, which meant I had no company in not being able to do things because I was the only girl. So again, I'm stubborn. So I was like, yep, that sounds boring. So I don't want to sit on the porch and be cute. I think I'm going to go play football with my brother. So there were lots of things like that between my parents. And it took me decades to figure out which was her and which was him. Because my mother was quintessential Southern woman. Pledged Delta in 1957, didn't go overseas to marry the guy she was engaged to because my grandmother said she couldn't. I was like, you were grown. She was like, but my mama said I couldn't go. So, yeah, so very much not me. But yeah, super sweet. That person that you could call at 10 o'clock on Sunday night and ask them to make you 3 pounds of potato salad for tomorrow, and she'd do it. I had her. Yeah. So I had her, the super sweet one. And then I had my dad, street a little bit. Yeah, they were so different. But my father was very, very smart. Um, Loved music, wrote a little bit, which I didn't realize until I shared with him that, I was writing a little bit of poetry or whatever. And he was like, oh, yeah, I used to write some stuff. But a lot of my father's influence on me came later in my life, later, like into my 20s. He died, I was 36 or 37, but my father was afraid of me. He said, I just thought you were going to break my heart.
What?
And so for a long time, he kind of kept me at a distance. And then probably around 20 or so, like halfway through my time at JMU, he, in my opinion, got weird. Like he would sing Ain't No Sunshine When She's Gone when I would leave to go back to school. Started like kissing me all the time. I was like, who is this dude? But he was just really afraid of me, quote, breaking his heart. I learned later as I got to know my parents as people, most of the women my father dated looked more like me than my mother. So as you know, my mother's brown,
Wow,
medium dark brown skin. Most of the women my father dated were my complexion or lighter. And so he saw me in a way through, I guess, the lens of some of those people. And I look a lot like my grandmother, too, which is what he eventually started calling me, as grandma. My nickname my father called me. But my parents' influence on me collectively was that I had to do well. And it wasn't even a push. It was more of just this unspoken expectation. I can remember being in high school. My parents, I did an experiment once 6 weeks, because in Portsmouth, we got our report cards every 6 weeks. And 6 weeks, I got an F in physics, just to see if they would notice.
On purpose?
On purpose. Like I had to work to get an F. And so I waited until the next grading period, when my physics grade was a B again, to tell them. I was like, you didn't notice. Like my parents literally would sign my report cards and never look at them because they just assume everything's fine. And so I did that literally. I was like, I don't think they're paying attention, but I'm going to check. So I got F in physics 6 weeks. But it was, it's interesting, obviously, in retrospect now, looking at my relationship with my parents. My mom used to say, all I wanted was a little girl. I'm like, I'm sorry, because you got me. Because like we negotiated number of ribbons in my hair to go to church. And it was like always, okay, but as soon as we get home, can I take the ribbon out in a car? She was like, okay, just don't take it out before we get in the car. Yes, ma'am. Because when I get home, I'm putting on my Carolina Blue Pro Kids and some tough skin jeans. This dress business is for the birds. But again, as I got older, my relationship with my father really got closer in ways that nobody knew. Because I knew that I could get a straight answer from him. So my father's name was William Ratcliffe, but as he would tell you, my friends call me Billy. So like we got to a place just because of other things in my parents' relationship and how they interacted, that my father was two people to me. He was my daddy, so I loved him, but he was this man who I had issues with. So a lot of times I call him Billy. But when I needed something, when I needed a conversation that was going to help me get to the answer, I said I would call him Daddy. And so when he answered the phone, if I said Daddy, he'd say, what's wrong, Grandma? So even in the 2 years preceding his death, when I was living in Kentucky, I was dating a guy over in Louisville. So I drive to Louisville because my mother had moved to Kentucky with me. So I drive over to Louisville. And on Sunday, I'd be driving back to Berea, and I called my father whenever, I was making that drive. It was like a 2-hour drive. And so when he got really ill, my brother said, you need to come home. We don't know how long he's going to make it. I said,
Mm.
I don't need to come home. I talk to my daddy every Sunday.
Yep.
And they were like, really? I didn't know that. I said, because it's not for you to know. That's
Mm.
between me and him. That's our relationship. And for all of the things that my father didn't do for me, my mom, and my brothers growing up, what he did do is apologize to me. He said, I'm sorry because I did some things out of ignorance. I did some of them out of spite. I did some of them out of sheer fear. But I know I didn't do everything you needed. And I'm sorry for that. And so we could go on from there. So he didn't leave this world with me having all of these unspoken regrets or, misunderstandings. I knew who he was. And so I could forgive him for what he wasn't for me, and then embrace what he was. So, yeah.
Oh, amazing. And this is why I love the legacy spotlights, because to me, we held you and me personally in a high regard. I don't know these stories, but they're very inspiring and also insightful. I want to talk about, Dorita, your time from JMU and what led you to Virginia Tech, because that is when, to me and my teammates and my big brothers and even my young brothers, you became like, this sweet but yet stern, motivational. Like, you held us accountable. You could see through our BS, and it's just every time I look back, I smile, man, because that was a really golden era in my life, in my development, and you were a huge part of that for me and so many of my teammates. Big D, Derek Smith, and Ken Oxendine, and Marcus Parker, and we could come to you, but
It's funny.
it.
Marcus,
Uh-oh.
Al, Ox.
Oh my goodness. But so you went to JMU, you graduated, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention you also, is that where you became a Delta? Is you
Yep.
pledged?
Fall
Yeah.
1988. Yep.
Yeah, so you're a Delta. My mother's a Delta, and a lot of my friends, my female friends, are Deltas. So that's a big accomplishment as well, But what led you to tech, and also two-part question, and I guess start off with this question first before we talk about tech. How did you get into? I know you were a tomboy growing up, but in this field dominated by men, especially the further you go back, the 80s and 90s. How did you get into this field of athleticism and working in an administrative part with men making these decisions and bowl games and basketball games? How did you get into that field?
So let's start with JMU because it all bleeds kind of into it. So I'm in a major Black writers class at JMU, and the professor is Dr. Joanne Gavin, who's an AKA.
Mhm.
And Dr. Gavin was director of the Honors College. I was not in the Honors College, but I just wanted to take class with this woman. So I'm not a morning person, by the way. I don't think anything should start before 10. And so her class was at 8 o'clock. So in 4.5 years at JMU, I think I took 3 8 o'clock classes. Um, and so I took this class with Dr. Gavin. Like halfway through the semester, she said, when you come, it was a Tuesday, Thursday class. When you come to class on Thursday, you need to tell me where you're going to graduate school. I hadn't even thought about going to graduate school.
Mm.
And I was like, okay. And she was that kind of personality that you didn't have the conversation about, you hadn't thought about it. She told you you were going, so you needed to be able to tell her where. And so I was a medical technology and psychology major at the time with a minor in English. And so I had been thinking I'm going to, go to do this rotation and go be a medical technologist, hematologist in particular. And so I go to the advisor and start looking, and we look at my science grades and my psychology grades. And she was like, you might want to look over here. So I started looking, okay, what's the toughest psychology program to get into? Because I'm going to start there. Because if I start there and I don't make it, there's like stuff under it. So clinical psychology. Okay, so let me look at some programs, and I started thinking about what would I do research wise, and that kind of drove the schools. Okay, so I want to work with African American populations. So I'm going to look at American University, Catholic University up in Philly, you know, like all of. End up visiting Ohio State and some other places. And so I went back, told her I'm going to apply for clinical psychology programs, and I'll apply here, here, and here. She was like, you need to apply somewhere in Virginia too. And I was like, oh, okay. So when I said about going to Philly, my daddy was like, absolutely not. My father used to hang out in North Philly. So he was like, absolutely not. And so then I kind of focused on American in DC, and then they offered me like some change, and the state of Virginia offered me a fellowship. The Council of Higher Ed of Virginia offered me a fellowship. So I was like, oh, guess I better go visit Tech. And my line sister, Lisa Briggs, was already going to Tech. She had gone to like some summer research programs while we were undergrads at JMU, and so she was already going to go, and I was like, well, let me check it out. Then I got the details on the fellowship. So in 1990, the state of Virginia was giving me a check for $1,100 a month to go to school. And then Tech paid my tuition. I was like, oh yeah, that's where I'm going.
Oh man.
Yeah. So I go, and the first year I lived there, I got a letter telling me that my fellowship had been canceled. And so I was like, oh, I need a job. And one of my sorority sisters, Tammy Togans, was a math tutor. And Tam was like, hey, they're paying grad students $7.50 an hour. I was like, what? So off I go to see Dr. Vi and Bernadette Jones. I was like, so yeah, I understand tutors, blah, 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 blah. And so I started tutoring, and that was the fall. When did Waverly start? 92? Fall of 92. So I'd gotten through 2 years of grad school before I got that cancellation letter. Oh, and it was so heartbreaking. Again, I told you I have 3 brothers. When I realized I need to save some money, I signed a lease to be roommates with 3 girls. And literally the day after I signed the lease, I got the letter saying that the cancellation was an error. And I was like, ugh. But anyway, so I started tutoring, and then that spring they let Coach Jones go. And so obviously Bernadette was gone too. And at that time, there were only 3 academic advisors in the athletic department. And so I told Dr. Vi, I said, well, I'll help the freshmen and sophomores because they're just doing general studies stuff. I can help them with getting registered, because it was like right that point in spring where you're registering for fall classes and all of that. I said, I'll help them. And that'll, ease things up for you all a little bit. And he was like, okay, good. And basically for the next year, because I was spring of 93, the next year and a half, I basically worked as an academic advisor. I mean, they literally would just like string hours, and they'd be like, okay, when you get to 38 and a half, we got to cut that off, and then we'll put it on the next pay period, because I had to stay not full time. So, did that, the whole tutoring thing. And obviously one of the first people I tutored was Waverly Jackson Jr., whose birthday is today. So
happy birthday to my guy Wade, man.
Yeah.
Oh man, my God.
Yeah. So tutoring Wave. I tutor other players too, obviously, but end up after like the first half of the fall of his freshman year, maybe not even been half. Bernadette Jones said, "Hey, I got a kid I think you could work with. I don't know why, but I just think you all will work well together. And he needs some help." Okay, so I meet him. And I'm like, okay. And we start talking, and Wave's pretty open about this. He has some learning disabilities and came from a school district that didn't do a great job. And so he had some deficits. And I had the pleasure of telling him in one of those very small tutor rooms what those deficits were. And he like stood up and, got big over me or whatever. And I was like, okay.
Oh, hold on. He got mad?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I didn't. Okay, good. Continue. I'm sorry.
I don't think anyone had told him at that point, right? Because my perspective, that school district just moved him along.
Yep.
And they did some kind of shady things to get him enrolled in tech, to be quite honest. And I had a meeting. So Dr. Vi, Coach Beamer, and the head of admissions were having a meeting about Waverly. And Dr. Vi said, well, Derita needs to come because she spends more time with him than anybody. And so, again, I'm a grad student. So I got on, jeans or sweats or whatever. And I was like, well, I'm gonna go home and change clothes. So, I go home and put on some professional clothes or whatever. And I'm sitting there and I'm mostly listening. And they're talking about, what his high school did and, how are they gonna rectify it? And, just going around and around. And finally, Dr. Vi says, Coach Beaver says, so Derita, what do you think? And I said, well, gentlemen, it seems to me that your colleagues in education have already failed this young man. Let's not join him. Let's do as much for him as we can for as long as he's here, for whatever amount of time that is. And Coach Beaver was like, sound good to me. And so at that point, I was like, okay, I'm going to do all that I can within reason to help this young man. None of Waverly's disabilities were documented, so he was not eligible for accommodations. So from that semester forward, they bought 2 sets of his books. So I had a set of Waverly's textbooks. Initially, I would read his textbooks onto tape. So he would listen to the tapes while he, read through or whatever. We did all kinds of stuff. And, eventually he graduated, but not before he went to the league, but then came back and finished.
Yeah. So number one, I learned when I got to tech, a lot of us, especially back then, I think there's more awareness about IEPs and mental health. But in reflecting and just legacy spotlight, that's why I think when I talk about my time at Tech, people like you and Dr. Va and the coaches, Coach Spring and those guys, I tell people all the time, they care. You talked about when we were prepping for this interview, my mom, making sure you looked after me, people like you and so many other, even Nikki Giovanni also, your sorority sister. Looked at it was a family atmosphere, and I don't think, and I know I can say this with confidence because I deal with so many former athletes from Virginia Tech on my platforms. A lot of us there would not have made it if it wasn't for people like you that took the extra step, not just the extra step, the extra mile. That is huge. I never knew any of this, by the way. When I got to Tech, Wade was some big, him and Hank Coleman and all those guys were walking around. They look like Avengers to me. They were my big bros. So I just looked at them and, you go to class, you go to practice, and you travel for games. But on behalf of those guys, I say thank you again. But speaking of those guys, you throwed some pictures up, man. When you got there Tech, man, now Tech is a household name. Everybody knows about Virginia Tech. But back then it was a university tucked away in Southwest Virginia in the mountains. You're from P-Town. You did go to JMU. So you had been in the college town atmosphere, but when you got there and you got comfortable and established, did you see yourself being there as long as you did and staying as long as you did?
No, because again, when I came, I wasn't going to work in athletics. And even when I started working in athletics, it was just something for now. Like I didn't think it was what I was going to do. And I can remember in 95, I went home for my 10-year high school reunion. And, people were like, oh, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, assistant director or director of student life, whatever I was at that point in time, doing this ABC. Oh, yeah, yeah. I was like, oh, yeah, no. Like, no, that's not. Oh, yeah, we always thought you'd do something, around sports. Like, what? And that was probably the first time I reflected back on things I'd done. I remember going on, I think it was, I went to orientation at JMU. So, summer orientation. And I ended up sitting in the basement of the dorm I ended up living in, helping a guy with a paper. When I was in high school for my senior year English class, the football coach, Coach Joe Langston, and our basketball coach, boys basketball coach, came to me and asked me if I would change English classes because there was a first year English teacher and she had one period that had all these football and basketball players in it, and she wasn't able to handle them. And they were like, would you mind changing classes? And I was like, I don't know. Let me check. Let me call JMU and be sure that, because you know how in Virginia they had these tracks,
Yeah.
And so I was like, I need to make sure if I drop down to a lower English class that won't have any impact on me getting admitted to JMU or whatever. So I called Forrest Parker at JMU. He was like, no, you just need to finish English 12. Got it. So I switched English classes and we had a meeting, me, the football, basketball coach, and the English teacher, about the parameters of what I could do in the class. So I had the power to stop class if they were being disruptive and get them in order. I was like, this is crazy. But I didn't think it was crazy at the time. At the time, coach asked me to do something and we all knew that they would listen to me. So that's what I did.
Yeah.
And again, in hindsight, in retrospect, yes, this all makes sense, right? I just didn't realize it was where I was supposed to be going or that it was even an option. I mean, who knew you could have a career in athletics and not be a coach, not have been an athlete? Like that wasn't anything I'd seen. So I didn't know. I didn't know academic advisors really till I knew, the folks at Tech, although a little bit undergrad because the guy I dated at JMU was a football player and he also had some learning disabilities. So he had tutors. But yeah, it didn't seem like I didn't know it was a thing at that point. But clearly I was on a path and there was a plan for me that I didn't know about.
Oh yeah, it was a plan. It was definitely a plan. And 95, you mentioned 95. So when I look back, I tell people all the time, like I have a media personality. I'm on Twitter and I do a lot of stuff with radio and podcasts. But I'm quick to tell people, even my own three children, I am thankful, even though TikTok and YouTube has made a lot of people a lot of money, entrepreneurship. At the same time, I look back at my 5 years at Tech, we were wild. Now, we ended up leaving as men. We were better men. Many of us made it out. But when I looked at you sometimes, I would look at you and I was like, man, she can come in here and deal with some of the most wildest personalities in the state. You talking about outspoken players and guys that would just, we would be in the academic offices, over at Castle up there, man, whether it was to get our schedule fixed or study hall or deal with an issue or personal problem. Then you had a group of us waiting, whether it was in the lounge over there, and you would just come in and set us straight. Some of the jokes that were inappropriate, you ain't never blink. You were like, hey now, and I would look like, man, she can come in and deal with us. But 95 was also the year that's well documented. We now have Coach Brent Pryor, Virginia Tech, the head coach. He was a GA at that time.
Yep.
And I've talked to Cornell Brown and JC Price that year, in those 94 and 95 specifically, you had probably one of the most dynamic coaching staffs in Virginia Tech history, as well as in college sports, where You had Al Mason in '94, then Bud Foster, Stein Spring, also a JMU graduate. You had J.B. Grimes, who may look small, but was one of the toughest people you ever meet. You had, Coach Mike Gentry. Bustle ended up coming back after, coming back and leaving. But anyway, all those personalities, you had the coaches, you had the players. That's the year we went to the Million Man March. We won the Sugar Bowl. When you look back on '95, man, I see you smiling. Was it a great time for you as it was for me and my teammates?
Oh man, it was so much. Um, good. I mean, good years. I mean, you talk about what it did for you all. I mean, it did as much or more for me. Um, like I was just being who I am. Um, but you all helped create the foundation of like what my whole life's work was going to be and how it was going to be in a lot of ways. Again, growing up a tomboy, like it was the best of everything. Like if I was working on something in the office and I got stuck or, writer's block or whatever, like I would go down to the defensive room and watch film with Bud and Charlie now. Like, oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Wait a minute, hold on. Bud let you in?
Oh, Vic.
Yo, I never knew that. I was an offensive guy, but I didn't know he let you in
Yeah.
there.
Oh yeah. I would go
Oh
in and
man.
watch film with them, and it was just like kind of my getaway. And I used to jokingly say, hey, when I grow up, I want to be a linebacker coach. Um, because like I always loved defense. Like I love you, that, but love defense.
That's all good. I get you.
I can still remember when I was at JMU. My then boyfriend's roommate was free safety, Upton Jackson from Big Stone Gap, Virginia.
Stone Gap.
I don't even know who we were playing, but receiver came across the middle and Upton lit this dude up. Helmet came off. I was like, oh, I was like, nothing else have to happen the rest of this game. Like that is it. So yes, I used to love going to watch. So yeah, Bud and Charlie would let me come in. I mean, there was a period in time where Bud and I were really close. And going through personal things, having conversations, because the way Coach Beamer did things, y'all would finish practice, guys would go home, have dinner with their families, and then come back, watch film and do whatever they needed to do. A lot of those times, Bud and I would just sit there and talk about life and what was going on. And so we were.
Glad you mentioned that because I did know you and Bud were close, but I figured out later that you weren't just a mentor and a leader for us young men, even some of the female athletes, but a lot of the coaches came to you and talked to you to check on their players and also would talk to you because you had that spirit and that personality to give everyone balance. And that's a God-given gift because people can go to life coaching school and all that, but everyone doesn't have that it factor. You have that it factor on the field, but you also that it factor to deal with people and meet them where they were. You were the only person that could get Toni Morrison, my brother, to calm down and listen and not get caught up in his songs and jokes. And I mean, that's an important thing. But at the same time, Dorita, I do want to touch on something. And this is something I know you see now, and you saw it back in the '90s, and even when you were at JMU. Unfortunately, you can't help and save everybody. Is that the part of the job that does bother you when you see a player that doesn't take advantage of their resources or support team or doesn't listen?
Yes.
And because I know as a therapist and as someone who still does some stuff with athletics coaching and things like that with my nonprofit, you see some of the most talented, intelligent men and women, and they can just get caught up, and especially at that level, a decision can end up costing them, and it doesn't change how you feel about them. But at the same time, is that the part of the job that does bother you?
It does. In your day, it was losing them to Madden, but
Yes.
yeah, you're like, okay, you're gonna be a Madden champion, but you're gonna be home. Um, It has been, and quite honestly, when I was athletic director at the D2 school, like part of getting back to a D1 school was the difficulty I had being the voice, right? Because all of my other positions, I was supporting the athletic director in some manner. And there are things that you can say when you're not the head of it, that when you're the head of it, you can't say them. So it was difficult for young people, whether that was young coaches or student athletes, for me to be trying to help you figure out how to stay, and then being the same person that tells you, you got to go. Like that was hard for them. So I was like, this is a space I want to be in. I want to be in the space where I keep issues from becoming problems. I can't do that as the athletic director. I can do that as the assistant athletic director, the associate AD, whatever. I can work in that space. And so that was part of only being an athletic director for 3.5 years. I never really wanted to be an athletic director ever, but I was like, you know what? I have an opportunity. Let me give it a shot, because I don't want to be 50 and wonder if. So now I know if I need to do that to feed myself, I can. But some of my greatest regrets are those athletes who left without a degree, or left with so much bitterness that they couldn't take advantage of what was available to them. And even now, I mean, the transfer portal breaks my heart, because I know everybody that goes in is not going to find somewhere to go.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying that, because fans just keep it moving because, okay, that guy's gone, that girl's gone. But just say it again. A lot of people do not get picked up.
Yeah, they don't. And I mean, I was listening to a podcast a couple weeks ago, and they were talking about women's basketball, because, you know, I'm on the NTA women's basketball committee. And so anytime something comes up about women's basketball, it kind of pricks my ear anyway. But they were talking about, I think it was like 1,700 total women's basketball student athletes went into the portal last year, and about 300 never show as matriculating anywhere else. And I mean, when you look at the number of professional sport opportunities for women in basketball anyway are limited, you didn't even give yourself the opportunity to finish getting a degree.
Yeah.
Mostly on somebody else's dime, depending on whether you're, you know, Division I or not, because at two, obviously they're equivalencies, they're not head counts at Division II. But yeah, just seeing and I mean, being at the level I'm at now, I mean, there is absolutely nothing you need and hardly anything you want that you can't get at an SEC school as a student athlete. And to see the decisions some of these young people make, and I'm like, I know you're going to regret this. It is, and I probably was more heartbreaking to me now, Vic, than back when you guys were in school, is some of the parents of these students. I think there were fewer parents when you all were in school when I was first starting, and maybe it was because I was younger and I wasn't aware, who are pushing their sons or daughters to do things that those young people don't want to do.
That's very prevalent now. That was not like that back in the day. I know that. It was.
I mean, it's amazing to see, you know, a young woman who's happy on her team and relatively happy with her role. Yeah, she'd like to start, but she understands that the five of them better than her.
No doubt.
But mama, AAU coach, high school coach, you know, all of these people. And with NIL, you got, you know, that fourth or fifth voice about, you know, you can get more if you go here. But everything in for everybody, you know. And I was speaking to a young woman the other day. She interviewed me for her dissertation, and she said, what's some advice you would give? I said, know what your non-negotiables are and don't let nobody knock you off them. I said, because you can go chasing after things that people tell you you should want. But if you don't want them, you're wasting energy and you're going to get them and they won't mean anything to you because you never wanted it to start with.
Uh-huh.
And so now it is, I think, even more heartbreaking because I also will then see the social media presence of those folks, and I know it's a mask. And just because of how litigious people are now, there are things that I could say to you all that I can't say to students now.
Okay.
You know, I mean, I think about a very famous Virginia Tech player who was having relations with lots of young women and doing so without protection. And his teammates came to tell me about it. And I was like, why are you telling me this?
This is what I mean about you got everything.
I was like, why are you telling me this? Because you can talk to him. He'll listen to you. I'm like, I don't want to know this. But I went to that young man and said, hey, I can't do that now. I mean, there are a couple I've developed enough of a relationship, but like now that takes like 2.5 years to know who I can say that to. I mean, I can remember, again, my career is built on some of you all's mistakes. I mean, those 21 arrests over those 18 months, 95, 96 is how I got into administration.
22 arrests. 22 arrests.
But I can remember telling guys at Tech, look, when you go downtown, if there's a drunk girl that want to go home with you, I promise you there's a sober one too, and the sex will be better.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say that to nobody now.
No, you can't even do what you did when you went to talk to that player about safe sex. Now that's a lawsuit. You on Fox 5, a documentary, 30 for 30, your career, you're labeled, you're gone, and you're canceled. And it's unfortunate, but I think that's what's missing, and it's a fine line. But you spoke on it because you lived it, and I'm glad you recognize that people did listen to you back then. They listen to you now, but you have to tweak it. It's tough, man. But I think, again, I say it again as much as I can. Like when you and I were in those spaces together on Twitter, and I said to all the younger Tech fans and followers, you are talking to the GOAT. You're talking to Derita, now Derita Dawkins. You're talking to the GOAT because you saved a lot of lives, especially during that time. It's funny you mentioned about going downtown because during that time, when I speak on how that was the golden era of my life, even though I'm living a great life now, I'm blessed. I'm looking at what I learned about how to become a man because during that time, sexual assault and rapes across the country on college campus was a big issue. So we ended up having to take these classes on sex education and safe. I don't remember the program it was called.
What consent was and
what consent was. And I was in there with Bud Foster, Billy Height, and my teammates, and we were sitting there looking, and she was breaking it down. And I remember looking around the room and even thinking about my own experiences. Like, man, we need to really make sure we know what we're doing because you started to see with some of the people, not just at Tech, but other schools, how it was costing people, men and women, their future. Yeah. So I'm glad you're aware of that. I want to talk about another topic that I know you can speak on with credibility. You are a woman of color. You are a leader. You are a wife. You're in a very, very well-known and respected sorority, but you also are in a man's world. You're in a man-dominated profession. You talk about how you never intended to go this route, but at the same time, you were chosen for it and you've done a damn great job at it. But at the same time, I don't know personally because you and I haven't talked about it, but just being a grown man, I know how hard it is from when I talk to my wife and other female colleagues and friends, like, especially in your field. On one end, you're working with these female and male student athletes, and even some regular students who don't play sports, who talk to you, come to you. At the same time, you at a table and you're in corporate America where sometimes you're not only the only woman, but you're the only woman of color. Speak on it from the perspective, Derita, of the challenges and also some issues you had to overcome, and maybe even if you have enlightened some of your peers who may not have known.
Yeah. It's been different at different points in time. I've gotten, comments about being lucky. And, I was like, I don't know if I'm lucky, as much as I put myself in the right place. Some days it's frustrating. It has been probably harder in the last year and a half than probably the 25 years before that. Just, post George Floyd, right? Like I've told, I think I still have it pinned on either Instagram or Twitter, where I say something like, for all of you who were outraged in June of 2020, where are you now? But again, I chose to go to JMU partly because it was everything Portsmouth wasn't. And I knew there were lessons that I needed to learn, right?
I can relate to that.
Yeah, at Norcom, there were 20 white people in my graduating class.
Well, I know.
So I was like, I need to see how things work, in the real world, because I know this ain't the representation of, everything out there. Because I was a medical technology major at JMU, and in science classes, I was often, the only woman of color, sometimes the only female, whatever. So I got used to that. I did kind of weird things in class, like I would sit at my desk going in a different direction than everybody else. So if all of the desks were facing north and south, I would take one and put it over by the window and turn it east-west. So when I spoke, even if you didn't want to look at me, just because I was in an odd place, it was almost like you were forced to look at me, because I knew how easy it would be to just be ignored, right? So I was like, yeah, I'm not going to let that happen. Professionally, it has been an interesting mix of things. It has been race, gender, and age. So people have almost always thought I was younger than I was. I remember Pearson Priolo's mother asking me if I had a boyfriend. I was like, I'm going to be his academic advisor. She said, oh, honey, I thought you were a student. No, ma'am. I thought I found my boy a good girl. No, ma'am.
Yo, Pilo's mom.
But so the mixture of all of that has led, people to say things to me like, so who have you been sleeping with to get here?
Oh.
And, because I'm a little bit of a smart ass, I said, the question is, who haven't I slept with? Well, we know you're on the list. But
oh man,
I mean, it's been all of these assumptions about, well, if you didn't do this and you didn't do that, how did you get here? And my answer to those people has been and will continue to be, I got here because I figured out what wasn't being done, and I figured out how to be good at what wasn't being done. But there are these ongoing internal conversations I have to have with myself about how many of these fights am I going to fight today? Because what I can't do is just let my voice become noise. So I can't fight about everything every day. I have to take some of the stuff and just write it in one of my notebooks and figure out how I'm going to get to it later. Some stuff, because of where I am now, 20 years ago, I had to write a lot of stuff down. I don't have to write so much stuff down no more, because I just, hold on, we're going to stop right here and we're going to deal with that. Because what we're not going to do is have that again. But that's taking time and building up some capital, to be able to do that. It has, athletics in general is such a gendered, heteronormative place and space, right? So there are so many things to deal with in that. I've had to I've had to deal with the advances of married men. I have had to deal with the advances of women. You name it. And it literally has been this ongoing comprehensive exam. Like you had to keep all the information because all of it became relevant to what I share with other people and how I help other people not stumble over what I stumbled over. Like I tell people that's my mission statement. That's my personal challenge to myself. Like no one coming behind me should stumble over things I stumbled over. If they do, that's my bad because I need to move that stuff out of the way. Or at the very least, know that I need to stand here and hold it back until you get past it and then run on ahead of you and, block the next one. It is still unfortunate that there are firsts for women and women of color and people of color in college athletics. It's ridiculous that you can still talk about having the first Black this or the first woman that in 2021. And there's still so many spaces for that, to happen. But that's because some things persist and people make choices to step out of this. Women especially make choices to step out of athletics all the time. There are unfortunately a lot of women in athletics like me who don't have children because they felt like they had to make a choice between a career and family. Luckily, there are some who are doing a wonderful job and showing that you can be a mom and a wife and be in this business. I tell people, I don't think God intended me to have children because of how I see parenthood. Like I wouldn't have been there for you if I had kids. Yeah. Because I wouldn't have sacrificed all of that time for my children. So I tell people, God intended me to touch more children than I could give birth to. So that wasn't, the path I was supposed to take.
And you did that. And I was getting ready to point that out. If it was God's plan, you didn't have children. Okay. But at the same time, I mean, from the point I met you, and then after me, Sharon and those guys and the guys before me, the Waverly and the Hanks and all those guys, and then at the different universities you've been at, and then now University of Arkansas, you have a lot of children that have grown up. I mean,
Vic, I will tell you, probably one of the most touching things in the last 10 years of my life was at Poon's funeral. And I even remember Ottawa had those ribbons, those maroon and orange ribbons. And Derek Smith came up and asked me to help him put the ribbon on. Okay, so I'm reaching way up to put this ribbon on Derek's lapel. And he steps aside and it's like 10 guys behind him.
Yep.
And I'm like, what are you? They were like, we still need your help. And like all that week, I mean, Larry Green called me and I remember telling him, I was like, look, I can't make this better. This isn't a class that, we need to drop you from and find you another one. I can't make this better. But one of the things that did was remind me that my greatest fear won't be realized. My greatest fear is that I don't matter. And I know, like, I was like, if I don't ever matter to anyone else again, I matter to this group that went through Virginia Tech in the 90s. I know I matter to them.
Oh, no question.
So, yeah.
No, you do. And God bless his soul. Pooms, aka Brian Edmonds, man. Him, Big Rich, Keon Carpenter. I think about Pooms' funeral, Brian Edmonds, and we were all on the stage, and it was like getting a great group, a great music group or band back together, or Wu-Tang, whatever your band or reference is, and we were on stage, and I was sitting there, and you mentioned LG, and we were all on there, Al Clark, Bruce, everybody. And those are my brothers forever. But again, you were the glue that kept it together, man. Like you were just, again, like we came to you, we still come to you. I mean, even when you were on the Twitter Spaces with me several days ago, and I didn't even know you until I looked at my phone. And I heard you speak. I said that voice sounds familiar. That voice will never leave me. And you started, and even in that format, because we were venting and complaining, but also processing all the stuff that was going on at Tech. And you said, you know what, guys, it's time to turn the page and move on from the previous regime and give this new staff a chance. And then you just very respectfully, and all of a sudden the tone of the spaces went in the right direction. And then I think back to a very special moment in my life. It was in '99, May '99. Um, then my girlfriend, now my wife, Shanice, were coming back from dinner and hanging out. It was the day of the graduation, and you actually scared me because you came from the parking lot. I was like, was she waiting over here? We were living in I was living in Collegiate Suites with Derek Smith and my wife and my girlfriend Shanice were walking, and then you came over there and you said, "I'm so proud of you." You gave me a hug, and then you held my hand and looked at me. You got a little teary eyed, and I did too. And then you gave me a hug again and said, "I'm just so proud of you." And you gave me a card, and I remember that, man, because it took me right back to that day when I enrolled at Tech and you were getting us checked in and took those pictures of us and Al Clark and all of us and they're acting a fool. And I mean, you snapped on us and we got ourselves together. And from that moment on, we made it, man. And I just want to talk a little bit real quick, Dorito, and we have a few more questions. Um, you're at University of Arkansas and you're working with ladies, women's basketball, correct?
Mhm.
Um, when you look now at where you're at, you're in the SEC, which is the mecca of college sports, big business, the premier conference in not just football, but in just revenue. It's a cutthroat business. You got South Carolina, Don Staley. I mean, you're talking about coaches all over, track, whatever. Um, when you look at Arkansas, what are you enjoying about that, and how is it in the SEC? And I know your role is still similar, but just talk about where you're at right now and how it is.
Um, it is right where I'm supposed to be at this point. Um, our mental health staff reports to me, and so I have my monthly one-on-one with our director. And Chris said, "You're in your restorative period." I was like, "Oh, that sounds good." Because I'm retiring in 4 or 5 years, and so I feel like I got to empty myself, right? I got to make sure that the folks that I'm leaving behind are ready, and they got it because I'm retiring one time. And so being here, I think, is where I need to be so that people who need something feel okay asking for it from me, right? I don't know if I was at EKU and saying that, well, one, I don't know if I'd be retiring in 5 years if I was at EKU, but because the SEC money is good. But it's a great time, I think. I mean, people would probably be shocked to know that the vast majority of the senior woman administrators, which is the designation I hold, the vast majority of the senior woman administrators in the SEC right now are Black. There's me, there's Tiffany Grimes at Alabama, there's Kirsten Brown at Texas A&M, Linda Teeler at Florida, Ann Carr at Mississippi State, Jennifer Saxon at Ole Miss, Maria Hickman at South Carolina, Christine Kelly at Vanderbilt, who's also a soror. So right now, 8 of the 14. For some reason, I feel like I'm missing somebody. And then the SWA for the conference, who's the associate commissioner, Tiffany Daniel, is also a Delta. So, Delta's running the SEC too. And Joni Taylor, the women's basketball coach at Georgia, all Deltas. But I think it's the right time. I think we are making some things possible because it's not one or two of us in the room. Here, I think I have the opportunity to influence changes that are more visible. When I arrived at Arkansas, our athletic training staff, which we have, approaching 20 people in athletic training across, all sports. Actually, more than that, because we got 3 full-times for football, plus their students. But anyway, our staff, our full-time athletic training staff, there was one woman of color. She was the women's basketball trainer. We now have 4 African-American women, 1 Asian Pacific Islander, and a Hispanic male on that staff. Because we're out there, right? Somebody just has to believe it. And make sure people look. And being at an SEC school, one, we have the resources to go look. We have the resources to attract. Now, we're not at the top of the SEC money-wise, but we have enough to make an attractive package to someone. And again, one of the things that's important to me is to leave spaces better than I found them. And I know part of that is for our student athletes to be able to look around and see people that look like them all throughout the department. Like, you shouldn't just have to go to academics to see somebody that looks like you if you're a student of color. You should be able to see people everywhere because there are credible, talented, ready folks out there. You just gotta, one, have a network that allows you access to those people. Because I know a lot of folks are of the mindset that I'm at the University of Northern, Middle, Midwest America, and a Black person's not gonna come work here. You're right. If you don't create an atmosphere or you don't reach out and tell them that you're going to make this place habitable for them. And those folks out there who are looking for opportunities to have somebody inside who says, it's going to be okay. It's kind of like I told your mama when you came on your recruiting visit. me and your mother was sitting talking and she said, she had all these questions for me. And I said, Ms. Big, I'm going to be honest with you. If you want him to be taught by Black people, then he need to go to Hampton. If you want him to play football in front of large crowds and have a chance to play on Sundays and get a degree, let him come to Tech. But right now, you can't have both of those here. And I think that's part of the responsibility of people in my seat, anybody in a position of leadership and or power, is you got to tell people the truth. Don't sell them no bunch of bull. And that's been part of who I am and how I am throughout my career. That, again, you might not like what I say, but you'll know when things get tough, because they will, that I told you the truth.
Yep.
And so I think that's why people come back to me, because they're like, oh, she told me, she said it was like this. Yes, I told you it's like this. So you can come back because I'm going to tell you the truth the next time too.
Derita, I hear you talk and I love it, man. I'm captivated because I remember those times. My mom, who, for them, it was my mom and dad, both graduates of HBCUs. Dad went to Norfolk State. My mom went to Hampton. And, I was heavily recruited by Florida, NC State, UVA, and Virginia Tech. So that was a new world for them. But again, that's the point you make. That's why I asked you about the University of Arkansas, because I wanted you to touch on the fact that there are some programs or universities making the effort to change the narrative, but it's going to take people like you to prove the narrative to be true, the new one, in the fact that you are a leader. You are an influencer. You are someone that can help bring people together. With that being said, my last question for you in this legacy spotlight is this. Um, I have all my guests that come on give their final perspective on this show about what life lessons they've learned throughout their career, throughout their journey. I know your journey is not complete, but it's been a very impactful one. As I mentioned throughout this, I speak for so many when you changed our lives for the right. You helped us become better. As I was planning to do this, Antonio Banks was like, you know, Banks can be very demanding. He said, yo, Vic, you better get one with Dorita on Twitter. And I was already working on it. And then, but he kind of, made sure I put you to the front of the list because I have a list of people I want to interview. But just give some feedback based on your perspective to those watching this um, or listening. And, just as far as when life smacks you in the face, when you have adversity, whether you're a woman or a man, what you need to do to keep getting it because you've been through your various challenges like the next man or woman. But what advice do you have for people to just get to where they need to be to keep reaching their goals and beyond, based on your life lessons and perspective?
Um, so again, I think it all starts with knowing yourself. Like you got to know who you are and what that entails, right? Like people don't know that like I was a super quiet kid. Um, and I still need time to myself. That's probably been one of the most challenging things about being married. um, yeah, like home for me has particularly once I started working in administration, like home is where I go to recharge myself to be able to be the me that people get. So you have to know who you are and know what your boundaries are and demand that people respect them. And sometimes that means not like I tell people, everything you know ain't other people's business. Sometimes that means, keeping some pieces of yourself to yourself so that when life wears you down, you still got that core that nobody has touched, that you can go somewhere and sprinkle a little water on it and let it regenerate itself. So I would say make sure you are taking care of yourself because that isn't anybody else's job. So make sure you take care of yourself because I can't do anything for you if I haven't taken, care of myself. Um, and I would say, again, back to knowing what your non-negotiables are, like knowing what you're not going, I can bend and flex, but there's some stuff, no, brother, I'm sorry, we're not going there. Like I can't do that. Um, and you need to know those things personally and professionally. Um, and have some good friends. You don't need a whole lot of them. You need two or three real good people that you can count on, that you can break down in front of, that you can ugly cry with, that you can tell the things to, that if anybody else heard them, they'd be like, oh wow, like yeah, I'm not rolling with you no more. Like you got to have some real people in your corner, because there are tough times, but hopefully you're a tougher person than the times you face. And there will be times that the situations will be bigger than you. They will be badder than you. And so, take your blow. Don't hop right back up because you might get hit in the mouth again. Stay down there, gather yourself. And when your leg's not shaking no more, go on, stand up and, keep it moving. But, you ain't got to jump up every time and, say, I'm going to take some more blows. Sit your ass down and get yourself together.
No doubt. No, and that's wise words from a wise woman. And it's been an honor to have you on, Derita. I know I could talk to you for hours, but you have stuff to do. And I thank you for doing this Legacy Spotlight. We're recording this. We're going to air it later so the viewers will see it. But it's early in the morning, and I know you are not a morning person, neither am I. But when I wanted to record this, I wanted to make sure I get this in. I know when this airs, many of my teammates and some of your fans and friends and family will really enjoy this perspective you provide us today. And I want to thank you for coming on. And I want to thank everybody else that supports Victory Life. To continue to support Victory Life, follow us on YouTube at Victory Life, also on Twitter at Victory Life, and our Facebook page where we have great interviews and spotlights such as this one with Derita Dawkins. And Derita, I want to wish you well. I want to wish you a happy holidays. I also want to thank you for being the person that you are. I tell you all the time when I can, I love you. So many people love you and appreciate you. Your legacy is impeccable. You're remarkable, and you've been a big influence in my life. So again, thank you.
Thank you.
And
And I got one more thing.
Okay,
And
go
you
ahead.
and don't edit this out. So that's 17-year-old Dwight Vick. And until 5 years ago, I still had that post-it note. Dwight is
Vic,
nice.
nice. I don't know what I was doing. I'm not gonna edit it out. I'm not gonna edit it down now. No, I don't know what I was doing, man. But my God, that seemed like yesterday, but that was so long ago. But um, I had a good spirit back then. I've had a better spirit now because of people like you, man. Because I'll say this. I know I'm wrapping up. It's normally I conclude, but there was a time where I wasn't playing as much as I thought. We were so talented back then. I almost transferred from Virginia Tech.
Really?
And yeah, no one knows that. Very few people know that, I should say. Because you had me, Todd Washington, Gennaro DiNapoli. We were all fighting for time. You
Mm-hmm.
had Chris Malone ahead of me. He left, and I thought I was going to start right away. I played a lot, but it was me and Todd and Gennaro battling, and those are my brothers forever. But it was people like you and my father and Coach Steinspring and Coach Grimes and Billy Height who and Haygood and TJ who reminded me that this is part of the journey. So again, it was a family atmosphere then and we're family now. So thank you, Dorita, for all that
Thank
you've
you,
done.
Vic.
Thank you.
Look, and you are Vic. That's Michael and Marcus. You Vic.
Thank you. I tell people all the time I'm the first Vic. I got those two guys there, man. I got my cousins there, man. For real, thank you. And that's on record. Derita Dawkins Legacy Spotlight. She letting all y'all know I was the first one. I didn't score any touchdowns or break any records in that aspect. But again, thank you, man. And thank you to all the people that support Victory Life, all the people that support Derita Dawkins, man. This has been another episode in the Legacy Spotlight. Check us out for future episodes. And like I say, every episode, no matter where you go, no matter what you do, make sure you have a positive impact and you leave a great legacy. Like Derita. Thank you again.